that someone up until now has always been elected, serves a limited term, and does theoretically report to someone, which these days seems to be the big corporations, but be that as it may, there's someone out there. But we do, in fact, have an emperor. It's what I call the corporatocracy. It's a group of people, a very large group of people that runs our biggest corporations. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. You don't need a conspiracy for all of these people to realize what they must do to keep those corporations running. They all work under one premise, one single goal that drives every one of them. And that is to maximize profits regardless of the environmental and social costs. Maximize profits regardless of the environmental and social costs. And they go about it differently. Exxon has a different approach from Nike, who has a different approach from Monsanto, has a different approach from whoever. But they're all aiming toward that same goal. And these people control our mainstream media. Thank God for Amy Goodman in Democracy Now! Who's filming us right now, so you better clap. A little enthusiasm out there. But they control our mainstream media either through direct ownership or through their advertising budgets. They control our government, our politicians, because no politician can be elected these days without a lot of money. And most of that money comes from one way or another through the corporations. And so the corporations very much are in charge. And a few people run these corporations, what I call the corporatocracy. And again, this isn't a conspiracy theory. These people don't have to get together to conspire. They're all they know what the goal is out there. It's to maximize profits, regardless of social and environmental costs. And so they move in this direction. So how do we change this system? Oh, and incidentally, like emperors, they're not elected, they don't serve limited terms, and they don't report to anybody. They'd like to tell you they report to their boards of directors, but they're all on each other's boards, and they just rubber stamp each other. So how do we change this? Well, I think in a way we're extremely fortunate, because what we have today is an empire that's not been set up by the military. It's a commercial empire set up by economic hitmen. We don't have to defeat it militarily for the first time in history. Unlike our ancestors here in this valley before us, we don't have to pick up our flintlocks and go to war. Isn't that nice? We change it the same way that our neighbors to the south in Latin America and those 9 countries down there have changed it. We change it by the way we shop. We change it by the way we vote to a certain degree, but we have to recognize that no matter who gets elected president in this next election, that man or woman cannot do it by herself or himself. They need us out there. We must be the ones to do it. We have to be the ones to do it. What we must do is convince the corporations that they have to change the very premise, the very goals that they work under. So we can say to them, profits are okay, but only within the context of creating a socially just, environmentally sustainable, and peaceful world. As we talk about the energy crisis, the food crisis is really coming to a head now, and they're tied together, of course. And part of the food crisis is the high price of oil, and it's also the fact that so much land is now being turned into biofuels. And instead of being used to produce food for people, we're now producing biofuels. And this whole biofuels thing is tragic in many respects. It's not the answer to our energy problem. Solar and many other things and efficiency are the answer. But most biofuels these days result in the destruction of rainforests or farmlands, which creates more carbon dioxide, which takes away from fuel. But of course, biofuels are very attractive to the oil companies, because biofuels require pipelines and they require stations that pump biofuels if they're done on a massive scale. The oil companies can control that. In fact, they'd probably rather have biofuels than oil, because it's really easier to exploit rainforests to grow biofuels. Just cut down the trees and plant something else. You don't have to go in with big derricks and dig holes, and it's always the possibility you won't find any oil, but you know you can create palm oil in almost any rainforest. So the whole biofuels industry industry is just feeding into the oil industry. So you got those two factors, the increased price of oil, which affects insecticides and fertilizers and transportation and the biofuels business, and then you also have some radical climate conditions around the world, and you have the growth of China and a huge growing demand for meats and other products that the Chinese see as being, the step up in development. And yet at the same time, we're still subsidizing agriculture in this country in a big way and hurting the small farmers or all the farmers of Africa and South America and so many other places as a result of that. We talk about, free markets. We don't have any free markets because we're subsidizing. These are artificially low prices, and that's something that Cindy and Greg work on a lot in Africa. They can speak more intelligently about that than I can if you want to talk with them afterwards. But, this whole process we're going through, and I'm struck in how in this election, why aren't